Hello, everybody. So, thanks to Kyle Kolinsky, who let me know that I need to situate my microphone in a slightly different manner in order to achieve optimal sound quality. The struggle to make sure that you guys consume my voice with maximum listening pleasure continues. Anyway, I wrote a piece that was published yesterday at The Spectator, the same venue that Ben Shapiro effectively maligned on his train wreck BBC interview because he was saying that the chairman of The Spectator was somehow a secret left winger. The Spectator is a conservative magazine based in the UK. It has an American offshoot that I contribute to. And although it's, conservative, it allows for a somewhat wide range of viewpoints to be expressed. Anyway, the piece was about Joe Biden and why Joe Biden's formidability as a candidate seeking the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020 is being underrated or is not being discussed with analytical precision in the way that I think is required. And let me just say from the outset, the whole point of the piece, the essay rather, and it's pretty long, around 3,500 words. I actually could have written a lot more, and I probably will at some point. But the whole point of this essay, and what I'm about to say right now, is to be descriptive. It's to outline the various dynamics that I believe are operative for the Democratic primary race, which could give rise to Joe Biden securing the nomination. So I'm not expressing a normative view, meaning I'm not saying that I want this to happen or I desire this to happen or that I'm going to try to take actions or write things that will enable this to happen. I'm simply observing the landscape politically and saying that this is a real possibility, and then I state my reasoning. So if you yell that I'm a shill of Joe Biden or that I somehow have fallen in love with him and desperately want him to win the presidency, you're entirely missing the point. Because any journalist, anyone who styles themselves a reliable analyst in some sense of American politics or any kind of politics, ought to be able to separate their own personal preferences from their exercising of analytical tools to try to assess what the state of play is. I mean, that's just basic. I don't conceal my preferences. I tell them to you. I tell them to anybody who asks. My whole philosophy is to be as straightforward as possible about my views so that when I do go into this analytical mode, there's no risk of it being conflated with what my actual desires are politically, whether in terms of candidates or policy outcomes or anything to that effect. Okay, so please try to understand that distinction because on Twitter, especially, I know it's not the hotbed of intellectual rigor, but people are always saying, "Oh, now you're somehow this establishment, lackey or something because you're saying nice stuff about Biden." No, that's not the point. Even in the 2016 cycle, early on, I was writing pieces and reporting on Ted Cruz because I believed that he was being underrated in the Republican primary that year. And mind you, this was well before Trump got in the race. This was late 2014, early 2015, when the prospect of Trump running still seemed like a joke. And obviously some of my analysis was negated by Trump. But nonetheless, I think the fundamentals of what I had proffered at that time analytically were roughly accurate, meaning that Ted Cruz had a strong connection to conservative evangelical Christians in particular, who were a dominant force in the Iowa caucus. He had racked up some significant endorsements fairly early on from members of that demographic. And his various tactics that he employed in the years preceding the 2016 campaign, going back to when he was first elected in 2012, were all actually very beneficial to him in terms of accruing the political leverage that would be necessary to have a successful campaign. And sure enough, he didn't win, obviously, but he did win the Iowa caucus on the strength of his support from conservative Christian voters there. And he was essentially the runner-up for the nomination, whereas fairly early on in that process, nobody thought that Ted Cruz had any kind of chance. So I wrote a column for the New York Daily News on exactly this in, I think, November or October of 2014, and other pieces. So that's my same approach here with regard to Joe Biden. I'm not saying that it would be great for America if Joe Biden were to win the Democratic presidential nomination. I'm giving you reasons why there are certain dynamics that are observable right now which would lead one to believe that he has a very good chance of winning the nomination. Okay? So let me go through some of them. The most significant, of course, is the fact, and this sounds too obvious to even state, but people, I don't know, gloss over it somehow. He was the vice president for 8 years with Barack Obama. Barack Obama is an extremely popular former president among the Democratic primary electorate, not necessarily the general electorate, although his approval overall has actually gone up, as tends to be the case for former presidents when they leave office. But if we're focusing on the Democratic primary electorate, which we are right now, because that's the campaign he's mounting, and all candidates are mounting to secure the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020. There's no more popular figure right now by far than Barack Obama. I mean, Democrats absolutely adore Barack Obama. And again, not saying that's good, not saying it's bad. I can give you my own views on that at some point, but I don't even want to right now because that's not at issue. The issue is that Barack Obama has an outsized and dominant presence in the political minds of the people who are going to be turning out to vote in 2020. And Joe Biden was Barack Obama's most steadfast confidant for 2 terms in office, 8 years, and was by his side for longer than that if you stretch back into the 2008 campaign. And here's the thing. Something else people gloss over, and I don't really understand why they do so, is that they kind of, I don't know, they brush off that Joe Biden was also elected twice on the same ticket as Barack Obama. So yeah, people don't generally go to the ballot box and vote for vice president, right? They're voting for the top of the ticket, but it's nonetheless a ticket that they're voting for. Joe Biden received the same amount of votes as Obama did. It's a 2-person ticket. So, yeah, Obama obviously, I mean, it goes without saying, he was the presidential candidate, but that doesn't diminish the fact that Joe Biden was the vice presidential candidate and received huge, large majorities in both the popular vote and the Electoral College on 2 separate occasions, 2008 and 2012. And I would not dismiss the electoral utility that Joe Biden conferred to Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012. In 2008, I wasn't working in a journalistic capacity at the time. I was, a private citizen, and I did canvassing that year, meaning you go around and talk to voters and ask them how they're feeling about the election, and you try to persuade them to vote for a particular candidate. And I canvassed working class white areas of Philadelphia, so like North Philadelphia, where you had a lot of older white Democrats, largely, of a certain age, who had gone for Hillary Clinton in big numbers that primary cycle, actually, because Hillary ran against Barack Obama in 2008, if you forgot. And one thing that I can routinely remember them telling me is that they had some reservations about Obama, But Joe Biden being on the ticket made Obama more palatable to them and made them more inclined to vote for the Democratic ticket. Again, so that's anecdotal, right? But I think that was actually fairly common, or at least more common than people remember. Um, and that shouldn't be discounted because it means that Joe Biden provided Obama with an important electoral asset in 2008. Remember, at the time, there was still considerable anxiety among Democrats that people of a certain age would maybe not want to vote for a black guy whose middle name was Hussein. So although Obama, fairly consistently led in the polls that year against John McCain, there was always this lingering fear that people were lying to the pollsters or something and were going to stay home because of some racist or xenophobic or Islamophobic, you paranoia they had about Obama. It's the phenomenon of the Bradley effect, where white voters would tell a pollster that they were going to vote for a black candidate, but then actually not do so. And that was totally disproven by 2008, and it's almost irrelevant now as a factor in American political life, roughly. But nonetheless, I don't think people should overlook the value that Biden actually did provide to Obama. I mean, vice presidential candidates can have a significant effect. Trump's selection of Mike Pence had a significant effect in 2016. You know how I know that? Because I went around to swing states and talked to voters, some of whom were devout conservative Christians who had reservations about Trump's character traits, and even if they roughly supported his policies, didn't know how they felt about this, guy who'd been married 3 times. Later came out that he cheated on his pregnant wife with a porn star, that kind of stuff. So Mike Pence being on the ticket and being very well versed in the language of evangelical Christian political action, that also gave some level of comfort to a certain segment of voters who were maybe inclined toward Trump and had reservations. So a similar situation with Obama. Whereas you can find examples of vice presidential selections which were totally stupid strategically. So Tim Kaine made no impact really at all on Hillary Clinton's fortunes in 2016. Paul Ryan was a horrible pick for Mitt Romney in 2012. And you can go back down the list in history where there are examples like that. But the vice presidency historically was not a significant role, really. Usually the president ignored the vice president. Some exceptions going throughout history, but in general, the vice president was not a visible force in American political life. And that changed over the course of the 20th and into the 21st century. So you had, Walter Mondale is, kind of considered one of the more influential vice presidents in terms of expanding the role of that office. Dick Cheney obviously was, hugely significant, at least in terms of crafting policy in the administration. I don't think he actually provided much in the way of electoral assets to George W. Bush in 2000 or 2004, but in terms of actually the machinery of government, he was hugely influential. And similarly, Joe Biden was a big cultural force for those 8 years. He had these quirky mannerisms, Uncle Joe, that kind of stuff. He became a pop culture figure of a sort in his own right. And again, for the millionth time, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just noting that it occurred. So when Democrats now look back on, and by the way, Joe Biden totally shredded Paul Ryan in the 2012 vice presidential debate and made Paul Ryan look like a total twerp. And you should go back and watch that, because if Joe Biden has those same rhetorical abilities now, and he may not because he's 76, then his abilities just as a rhetorician and as a debater also ought not to be discounted because they're actually formidable. Um, but this is all just to say, when Democrats who are going to be voting in the primaries and caucuses next year, they have developed a wistful longing for those 8 years of Obama because they're inundated with Trump-related, furor every single day. There's always a major controversy of some kind, whether it's trumped up or not. There's something always going on with Trump. And they think of those 8 years of Obama as a time of relative, quote, normalcy. And this idea of normalcy is actually potent for a lot of people because they want to return to a time when politics seemed more stable to them or wasn't so anxiety producing or didn't constantly serve up outrages that they had to, sit and watch TV or fight on Facebook about. So that's an appealing notion for a lot of people. And you have to kind of think about who is actually going to be turning out in the primaries and caucuses next year. Is there going to be a segment that are like left-wing activists and organizers who are more inclined toward Bernie and, are going to give him a significant edge in certain respects? Yeah, of course. But they came out in 2016, right? I don't know that you're going to see a huge increase in the people who are now converted to Bernie relative to 2016. Maybe some around the margins, because he's making entreaties to more generic type of Democrats, and he actually has a lot of popularity just in the party overall. So there might be some of that, but I think in large part the people turning out are going to be what I've termed, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, Normie Democrats. And what do I mean by Normie Democrats? Well, it's a type of Democrat who, votes for the Democrat typically in elections, but isn't really immersed in the kind of internecine feuds and squabbles within the party. Basically likes every candidate, or at least most, if not all, of the candidates running. Isn't going to be, on Twitter, raging about, Beto doing something on Tuesday or a policy proposal issued by Kamala Harris or stuff like that. They're just not that interested in that sort of thing. What they're interested in is finding a candidate who can beat Trump, because they want Trump out and they want to restore the pre-Trump status quo, in effect. And who better to restore that status quo than the guy who was actually in the vice presidential office during that status quo, which they now aspire to bring back. I mean, it's pretty simple when you think about it. I see a meme going around, or let me just say this. So in 2016, the turnout for the Democratic Party was comparatively low if you compare it to 2008, when there was a lot of energy and attention on the race of Obama versus John Edwards and Hillary, and later Obama-Hillary, which Biden ran in and dropped out soon. So, but the thing is, Biden ran in 2008, and he actually ran in 1988. But the image in the heads of Democrats who are considering his candidacy is not drawn from his having run in 2008 as a presidential candidate, or 1988, which is like a lifetime ago. The image in their minds is his 8 years by the side of the first black president who's extremely popular. I mean, so when people bring up, he had these 2 failed campaigns, so he's going to falter this time. I mean, yeah, he might falter, but it's not going to have anything to do, I don't think, with the fact that he faltered in those 2 prior campaigns, because people don't care about that. They care about the status that he attained with Obama. And in terms of being his, second in command. There's actually precedent for this in history. So, like Walter Mondale, for example, was the Democratic presidential candidate in 1984. And he had actually sought the presidency prior to that. But once he became vice president under Jimmy Carter, obviously that massively increased his stature within the party and enabled him to secure the nomination with relative ease that year. And, Al Gore was Bill Clinton's vice president and easily secured the nomination in 2000. You can go down the list of stuff of examples. Yeah, we're in a different era. There are new dynamics right now, but we shouldn't just lose sight of that. Where that being that the vice presidency is probably the best possible platform that you can have if your intention is to get the presidential nomination of your party. So that's just an unparalleled asset that Biden simply has. Sorry. One meme that I see going around is that Biden is just Hillary 2.0. That he's just going to, implode, and he's going to be a terrible candidate. Everybody's just, puffing him up for no reason. Number one, I don't think people really are puffing him up. I think the coverage of him has been somewhat negative in the media. With that whole groping nonsense. By the way, don't comment on this video with anything relating to the groping thing, because I think it's a total phony and fabricated controversy in bad faith by people who have been propagating it. I don't even want to comment on it. It's just too stupid. Nobody alleges that he did anything sexual at all. So you can't Me Too Joe Biden out of contention. So just get that through your skulls, okay? So Biden is often referred to as like Hillary 2.0, meaning he's just the latest incarnation of like failed party orthodoxy. And that's true to some degree, but not in the easily categorizable way that people have been insisting. Because there are just key political strengths that Biden has that Hillary did not. And in turn, Hillary had key flaws that Biden simply does not have. The most obvious of which is that Hillary spent the entire 2016 campaign cycle under federal criminal investigation by the FBI for her own conduct, meaning she was investigated to determine whether she personally committed felonies. Now, that's a pretty big deal. I know a lot of Democratic partisans at the time tried to play it off as no big deal, but in fact it was, because it fed into the perception that she was corrupt, that she was a liar, that she was above the law, etc. And sure enough, it all came back to bite her, because on October 29th, 2016, James Comey issued his infamous letter announcing that the FBI had reopened its criminal investigation into Hillary. And now a lot of Democrats scream and complain that that cost her the election. It may have had an impact. I don't know if it actually cost her the election as such, but nonetheless, her legal jeopardy obviously was a big political liability. And as of now, we don't yet have any reason to believe that Joe Biden has a private email server tucked away in Delaware somewhere that's going to be the subject of an FBI criminal investigation. Now, who knows? There could be something that comes up, whether it's this Ukraine stuff that's floating around with respect to his son Hunter. So it's possible that the FBI does open a criminal investigation. I don't know, but at least as of right now, there's no reason to believe that will happen. So that alone is a huge distinction between him and Hillary. Then, of course, Hillary ran against Barack Obama in 2008 for an extended period of time, and often, pretty viciously attacked him. There's a hilarious clip that I cited in my piece from February of 2008 when Hillary goes on this sarcastic rant denigrating Obama, saying Obama is making everyone believe that the skies are going to open, the celestial choirs will be singing, and the light will shine down, and everyone will just realize that the world is that we should work together and the world would be perfect. So she was mocking Obama for being naive and foolish and underprepared. Biden never criticized Obama to that extent. And similarly, Obama never criticized Biden in the way that he criticized Hillary. And not just during the 2008 campaign. about a week ago, there were excerpts from a new book by Peter Baker of the New York Times that were released where Obama was pretty much maligning Hillary as having blown the presidential election in 2016 because she ran a soulless and lifeless campaign. And Obama also criticized Hillary for setting up a private email server, which is like the Hillary diehards must have just lost their mind when they read that because they get so angry when that gets brought up. It's all just to say that Biden clearly benefits from the association with Obama way more than Hillary ever did. In addition, because Obama and Biden were actually became close personal friends and partners. I mean, Obama even gave the eulogy at the funeral of Joe Biden's son, Beau, who died in 2015 of brain cancer. So that's how close they got. And, especially for the core constituencies that Joe Biden needs to court for 2016, you can't get a more valuable asset than that in a Democratic primary race. Joe Biden is trying to get early endorsements from powerful black members of Congress. And he's already gotten a couple, including Cedric Richmond, the member of Congress, the representative from Louisiana, New Orleans area, and Don McEachin, who is a member, representative from Virginia. Both have already endorsed Biden. And both are powerful black Democrats within the power structure of the Democratic leadership in the House. McEachin is actually overseeing candidate recruitment for the Democrats for the 2020 House races. So that itself imposes certain pressures on Democrats who want to run for Congress in 2020, where they're going to be kind of incentivized to endorse Biden if they want the backing of the Democratic machinery. So that's significant. And, those two guys are emblematic of the most important constituency for Biden, which is black voters. And black voters aren't monolithic, but in general, they have very positive feelings about Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. And so if you can benefit from your association with those two, that's a huge political advantage, especially for Southern blacks, where, because in Southern states, blacks generally comprise the majority of the Democratic primary electorate, including in South Carolina, which is one of the first states to vote. When Obama won the South Carolina primary in 2008, it was seen as an indication that black voters had embraced him, whereas before they really hadn't. They were, more behind Hillary. So John Lewis, the member of Congress from Georgia, who has a civil rights history, he initially endorsed Hillary, and then once Obama obviously gained a foothold among black voters, he switched his endorsement for Obama. That was hugely significant. So I just can't overstate the utility in a Democratic primary of Biden having been the most committed and devoted supporter of the first black president. It's just as simple as that. And not just for black voters is that significant either. I mean, there are a lot of white voters who feel the same way. Probably not as many proportionally, but nonetheless. So, I mean, you just got to reckon with reality in that sense. I'm not saying that that Biden is a shoo-in to win the nomination. I'm not saying that he couldn't implode. He very well could. But he's not going to implode, I don't think, because of some gaffe, right? Or because some old clip from like 1984 resurfaces showing him saying something untoward, because people already have a pretty complete image of who Biden is as a persona. So a gaffe is only has a damaging effect if it reveals something about a candidate that had been previously hidden. So Mitt Romney would be a perfect example of this from 2012 when the secret video came out of him castigating the 47%. Because Mitt Romney didn't generally talk like that in public. So that did have an impact on him. But Biden having a gaffe where he says like a goofy thing or like, Would anyone be surprised by that? Would that actually alter the perception of Biden for anybody? I don't think so. So I don't think it would be impactful in that sense. And it's the same actually for Trump. I mean, Trump is gaffe proof. I mean, what could Trump say at this point that would be an actual gaffe? Pretty much nothing. So but actually conversely, Hillary was not gaffe proof because she was very lawyerly in her manner. And when she said something that was deceitful, it actually kind of was a gaffe. And her deplorables comment, I think, had a big impact too. Because it revealed something that she kind of had suppressed until then. If memory serves, she said that at a fundraiser of some kind. Just like Romney did with 47%. So, you can't just... People who kind of are sitting back and saying, yeah, Biden's going to flame out because he'll say something stupid. I just don't think that's the case. Again, he may well flame out. And his cognitive capacities at 76 may not be holding up. So that could be the reason he flames out. But in terms of gaffes, I mean, I don't know. I just don't see that being what does him in. So, I mean, there's a lot more to say about Biden. Obviously, I can go on for a long time about this. But, just read the piece if you're interested. And I'll have more to say on this in the future. Anyway, just don't conflate any of what I said here with being a normative, endorsement of some kind of Biden. Because it's not. It's descriptive, and that's what people should be trying to do at this stage, and at all stages, really. So I'll talk to you later. Have a great weekend.